So we just had another broad Google Core updates. Those come a couple of times per year. In 2019 we had 3, and in this year we had the last one in May. So that's 7 months. And that also means that this was a pretty big update. So in this video we'll have a look at my sites and see how they're doing. I had some ups and I had some downs, and some interesting thing happened over the last couple of weeks. And today it's exactly 2 weeks since we had this Google update. So today we should have a good idea about what's going on. And then I also want to dive into some misconceptions, something that people get wrong, people misunderstand about these Google Core updates. And we will talk a bit about how to get rewarded when Google do these updates and how to stay clear of the penalties and the downsides to these updates. So there's a lot of things to cover, so stick with me in this video. But let's start by looking at my sites and see exactly what happened. So over to analytics here. Alright guys, I want to show you what happened to my sites and what normally happens to my sites with these broad Google updates. So this site here, for example, you see here we have December 3rd and December 4th. It definitely took a drop here over a couple of days, and then after a week, it bounced back. And that's how it normally is, because it takes a couple of weeks for these updates to roll out, and after a week they start patching all these unintended damages that I like to call them, that Google always do. So they do this drive-by shooting somehow, and then they see what didn't work and then they fix it. So it takes a couple of weeks to roll out the update altogether, just to get it all across the servers and so on, and we'll get back to that. But really also you need to wait a couple of weeks, because normally the traffic bounces back if your site is good, if it's a healthy site, if you did everything all right and you didn't violate Google's best practices and so on. So this is one site here. And here's another one. It got a huge jump here from the 3rd to the 4th, and it just continues to go up here over the next couple of weeks. So now we have almost exactly 2 weeks of data here to look at, because I have till December 16th. This is the day where I recorded this, and tomorrow it's exactly 2 weeks since the update hit. So this site here got a really sweet 37% increase in traffic when I look at the last 13 days compared to the 13 days just leading up to the Google Core update. And here's another site. This is a site where I'm doing a lot of testing. I have a couple of test sites where I test Google. And for this site here, I'm testing to write about everything there is to write about. So I don't have a specific niche for this site. It's just about everything, really. And it's kind of an interesting case, because I just went with a really broad domain name, and I wanted to figure out if I really needed to carve out this niche in order to get ranked in Google, as long as I use my strategy for going after underserved topics. I wanted to figure out if I could rank across a lot of things, because I see some really big websites that just tend to rank for everything. And I wanted to test with this site if you need a lot of authority in order to do that. So this site here is definitely moving slower than what I normally see. It's not growing as fast as my sites usually do. And I'll come back to this test here whenever it's conclusive in any way. But it seems like it's something is definitely happening, but I can't say for sure yet if my money invested here will have a return, because if the traffic will not be good enough, if I don't see enough page views per article, obviously my money will be wasted on this test here. But see here how it totally dropped on December 3rd and 4th, and now as I'm going to show you guys in this video, it bounces back over a couple of weeks. So don't freak out with these Google Core updates when you lose your traffic, but give it a couple of weeks so you can see what happens. And here's another site. It's also a test site where I'm testing some YMYL stuff. And it seems like this site here is probably not gonna get that traffic back unless something else happens with over the next couple of weeks. So I did a little bit of digging to see where I lost this traffic, and it's definitely the more YMYL stuff on this side that got hammered. And also for the other side here that got a really good increase in traffic, I also dived into the data to see which articles did get rewarded and where did I get that nice traffic boost. So it was really all across the board, I'd say, but for the more competitive stuff and some topics that have a lot of search volume. It seems like I was held back somehow, and now sort of I got those rankings that I feel like I deserved. And so it was definitely some of the more competitive stuff and a few articles with a lot of traffic, but really all across the site I saw some good rankings. But one article in particular got like 127% boost from one day to the other, and that was on a very competitive topic. Yeah, so I don't really care to look at what dropped on those sites that got back again, because it seems like Google fixed those issues, so there's not really much to see there anyway. So the sites that I didn't show you here, for example, Go Downsize, which you guys know, and also Sewing Machine Talk, there is just no change in traffic. Everything is business as usual over there, and also for the rest of my sites. So these were the ones that were interesting to see and where something happened over this update. And remember, never lose your mind if you see a sudden drop when the updates hit. You need to give it a couple of weeks for the traffic to bounce back, as Google fix these unintended damages that they always do with these core updates. Now let's talk about some misconceptions and something that people get wrong about these Google updates and also Google penalties. So I just watched some live sessions from Pedro Diaz. He's an ex-Googler. He's been working with Google on fighting web spam and also on search quality and their guidelines around that. So he has some really great insights into this. He was at SMX, and here are some of the takeaways that he shared with us during this event. So first of all, you will not get a penalty or get deranked in Google from having duplicate content on your site. A lot of people here on YouTube and across the web will tell you that duplicate content can get your site penalized, but that's definitely not the case. He made that very clear. And something else that I've heard people talk about several times now, and it's kind of annoying, is that if you use shared hosting like most of us do, because otherwise if you want a dedicated server for your site, it's crazy expensive, that if you're using a shared hosting like many of the cheap hosts out there, that you can get slammed by Google from being in what we can call a bad neighborhood, because the site sitting right next to you on that server could be something that you don't want to be affiliated with in any way. But that's not the case either. And he also talked about having links from outside your niche. Let's say you have a lot of links pointing to your site from other sites that are not related to your niche. Some people say that this can affect your rankings, and he clarified that it will not affect your rankings. And also the bounce rate. This is something that people talk about all the time. I really don't obsess over the bounce rate, because there can be good reasons for people to go back to Google after they just saw that one page on your site. So he also clarified that bounce rate will not affect your rankings or get you a Google penalty either. So 2 more to go here. 404s, so this is whenever you deleted some content, there's a URL on your site that's not working properly, and people will end up on this 404 page. This basically just means that there's nothing for the user to see. If you have a lot of those errors on your site, it will not penalize your site either or get you deranked. And finally, internal and external broken links, meaning that you link out to pages on other people's sites that are not there anymore, or you're linking to other pages on your own domain that's not there for some reason, or the link is just not working and it's not taking you anywhere. That will not cause you to get deranked in Google either. So a few more really interesting things that he touched on. The first thing being that a penalty from Google is always momentarily. You will not have a permanent penalty on your site. And that means we're working with a time frame. You'll not be banned out of Google forever. And this is also something we'll come back to. I did get from him, however, that if you are buying links and getting links to your site and trying to manipulate Google by building backlinks too much, you can actually be in a position where you'll never get back into Google. So there's that as well. And something else he mentioned is that these penalties are not only on the whole domain. It can be for a specific URL or just a set of URLs on your site, just a few pages or articles there. So that's when we're talking penalties. But in this video, we're mainly talking about the broad Google core updates and not a specific penalty. We're talking about that your site gets deranked in Google, that you lose traffic, you lose rankings because there's one of these major core updates. So this can happen if you have too many links pointing to your site all of a sudden. So let's say the links are coming too quickly, and this will only happen if you try to mess with Google and you try to go out proactively and pay people or just do massive outreach campaigns to get links to your site too early on. I also personally believe that if you go back in old articles and all of a sudden start adding links and new paragraphs with a link to some other site across your older articles, that can look suspicious to Google, because that will look like you're selling links, and that's probably why you would do it. I cannot really come up with any other reason why you wanted to go into old articles and all of a sudden start linking out to other sites. Not your own articles, but other domains, to try to give them a boost. So don't do that. And of course, if you have a lot of links that are just irrelevant to your niche, if you're linking out to a lot of stuff. So he did say that getting links from other niches that are not related to your niche will not hurt your site. But he also talked about if you're linking out excessively to just all and everything, that can definitely hurt you in Google, and that can be some signal to Google that you're trying to mess with them and you're trying to brute force your way into the rankings, and they don't like that. But if you're not doing any shady link building, or if you're not selling a lot of links from your site, you don't have to worry about this. So Google is working with thresholds. That means if you have too many links or too many links early on, or if you have too few links, that can cause you to not rank well in Google or even get a penalty. So this has to do with looking normal and not being an outlier. So you sort of have these thresholds that you need to be operating in between, and that's something that I also got from this talk. So if you do get a manual penalty from this, it will be because the algorithms saw some funny stuff with your site and they don't know really what to make of it, and then they will flag it in the Google system. Some Google employee will come in and take a look, and if they feel like it's not what it should look like you're messing with them, then they'll give you a manual penalty. But most of the times we're not talking about manual penalties. And if you are in doubt if you in fact did have a manual penalty, you can just look inside Google Search Console, because they will state it in there specifically if you have a manual penalty. But if something happened on your site around the 4th or the 5th of December this year, it was most definitely about the broad Google Core update that we're talking about in this video. So which sites will get rewarded from these broad updates? So why did one of my sites see an instant boost? So something that you need to look for is the quality rater guidelines. This is some paper that Google updates over time, and they have this massive paper that instructs the quality raters on how to assess good quality in Google. So Google has thousands of people going over websites manually to see if their algorithms are doing a good job. So that'll basically help them find stuff that works really well and stuff that isn't working that well. So it will sort of train their algorithm. So they are not going in and giving penalties left, right, and center. They're just checking whether the algorithm is doing exactly what it should be doing. And in those guidelines, we had some interesting updates recently. I believe it was in October. They did some updates, and they started talking more about what they call needs met. So this emphasis on needs met has to do with whether your article will meet the expectations of the user who ends up on your site, and whether you're meeting the intention behind the search. So it has everything to do with search intent and how to meet that intent with your article. So you really need to get into the brain and into the head of the searcher and really craft the best possible article, instead of just looking at a list of keywords and synonyms and semantics that you need to include in your article. Those days are over, or at least they soon will be. So my approach to this is to really try and craft the best possible content. Of course, we all say that, it's such a cliche. But when I talk about good quality content, I really talk about not thinking so much about keywords, and I will never allow my writers to have a list of keywords or dig into synonyms and try to force these words in here and there. I really just tell them to write the best possible content, and they need to think first about what they would put in the article before they even start checking Google autocomplete and all that stuff. And after they know what they definitely want to have in the article to make it the best resource and to meet the need of the searcher and meet that search intent, only then will they start diving into Google to use Google autocomplete and people also ask and all that good stuff to figure out what the subheadings and what other sections should be there. But actually 9 out of 10 times I give this complete outline to the writer before they start writing, so they don't even have to do that. They just start writing, and then for each section they will know exactly what to dive into and what they should research about. So in these Google Quality Rater guidelines, meaning the guidelines for these people who sit and check if the search algorithm is doing its job, it says specifically that you need a complete description of the topic And you don't want information that is just the obvious. It should be beyond the obvious. You don't want to just gather all the information that's already sitting there across the web and then just reorganize it into your own articles that's a little bit longer or something like that. You want to draw your own conclusions. And you want to include something that's not there in all the other articles. And then you also want to be very clear on how you came about this information, like really stating your sources. It also says so specifically in the quality rater guidelines. And they ask these raters to consider, would people actually link to this stuff from an offline magazine? Would they include it? Or you can't link from an offline magazine, obviously, but would people mention an article like this in an offline magazine? And would you want a real journalist and a real news site to link to this in case they touched upon the same subject? And they're really talking about looking for these trust and authority signals on your site. So this is something that's really, really important moving forward. You want to make sure that your site has really good trust signals. If people go to your about page, it should be super clear why they want to quote you for an article or why they should trust your information. So this is something Google looks for, and it's also something that the algorithm is trying to mimic and something that they are training it to start doing. So this is specifically for the about page, but I would say also for the front page. Have a great looking front page and about page, and this is something I've talked about a couple of times. Don't just share your own personal story and how you came to know about this or that. Really state some facts on the about page about what you know about this, any specific knowledge you have. Maybe your neighbor did something when you grew up about this, or maybe your dad took you fishing or whatever it is. Just state facts there. Don't just come with a cute story, but tell people exactly why they should trust your information. And don't just look like another blog. Make it look like something that's really, really great and like a huge website. You need to fake it till you make it. Look awesome from the very beginning. So now let's talk about what you can do if you did see a drop in rankings and you want to figure out what exactly happened there. So you can go first into Google Search Console and see if there are any penalties. But I mean, if you saw the drop around the 4th or 5th of December, it's most probably due to the core update. And then you want to also see if there are some security issues in Google Search Console. And then you want to see if it's site-wide or if it's only a few articles that took a hit from Google. You want to figure out exactly where you lost the traffic or where you lost those rankings. So if you do use a rank tracker tool, this is easy. I don't do that for my own sites. I actually just monitor the traffic to each article, and then you can always go into Google Analytics and compare the last week to that previous week before the update and see exactly where did you lose that traffic. Is it across all the articles or is it just on a few? Maybe it's a handful of articles that has to do with YMYL topics. And now let's talk about how to recover if you lost that traffic. So first of all, if you lost a good deal of traffic, let's say your traffic is cut in half, you should be aware that you will not get your traffic back until the next Google Core update. So be aware when you start fixing things that you will not see a sudden movement back. It's not like as soon as you fixed it, Google will see it and you bounce back. So it will not happen until the next core update, which will probably be somewhere around spring or early 2021. That's just how it works with the Google updates. I mean, if you lose traffic, you'll most likely get it back with the next core update if you did fix the issues. So if you did lose traffic, it's time to go in and figure out exactly where you lost that traffic. Which articles were getting hit? Is it site-wide? Then you might be dealing with something across your whole site, like maybe page speed, maybe there's something you need to fix on your site from a security perspective or something like that if you don't have HTTPS. But if it's just a few articles, or let's say it's a whole category of articles or something like that, you need to look at the intention behind the search and see if those articles are actually the best answer or the best article for that search query. And also John Mueller from Google has told us a couple of times that it will take up to a month before Google will find these new updates in Google Search Console because it takes time before they get new data. So you need to do this at least maybe a month before the next Google Core update, so they actually notice that you did something there. So it's about to get to work right now if you saw some drops in rankings. So you have time to fix this in time that Google will see that you fixed it before they do the next core update. So do everything you can on the site to create better trust, to make the readers like your content more. Maybe you have to work a little bit with the design so it just looks better. Or maybe you have some ads that are intrusive, that goes in over the menu, or it's just conflicting with the content and stuff like that. You need to make sure that the ads on your site are not interfering with the main content, meaning the text in the article. And also that you don't have too many ads. So there's these kind of things to look into. And really you should take a close look at the quality rater guidelines. I'll leave a link to them in the description if you did see a drop in traffic, because that's really where you can see exactly what Google is after when they're looking for good quality. So how do we make sure that we get rewarded with the next core update? So I want to include something that John Mueller said at the SMX talk. So he talked about all these things that Google look for, they are most important when we look for general searches. And when they're dealing with more specific searches, something that's very, very specific and something where maybe you're the only article there, then it's not as important. You don't need as many quality signals to Google in order to rank well. And that's also why I believe that this concept of going for underserved topics for a news site is just a great way to go about it. Because when you're competing up against the bigger sites, you need more trust and you need all those signals to Google. And you need more authority many times in order to beat those other sites. And we don't need that as much when we're starting with articles that hasn't been written already for the web. And as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And also, if you want to know exactly how I build these sites, you can check out the course I have on passiveincomegeek.com. I'll see you guys next time.